Central Services. We do the work, you do the pleasure. Hi there. I want to talk to you about ducts. Do your ducts seem old-fashioned? Out of date? Central Services' new duct designs are now available in hundreds of different colors to suit your individual taste. Hurry now, while stocks last, to your nearest Central Services showroom. Designer colors to suit your demanding taste. And scene. That is, of course, our performance of the opening scene of Brazil, one of the most perceptive and provocative films made by Earth humans. We are discussing it today as Criterion has finally released a new 4K remaster of this marvelous 1985 film. If it's new to you, we would characterize this film as George Orwell's 1984 meets Monty Python and the Holy Grail, with shavings of Jim Henson's The Dark Crystal liberally grated on top. The 1984 reference is quite literal, since the film borrows the characters and plot structure from that classic warning about authoritarian control of the truth and the individual. Monty Python is also a literal reference, since the film is written and directed by Python alum Terry Gilliam, and the absurd sense of humor, the whimsy, it permeates the film, lightening the otherwise bleak reality as presented by the film. As for The Dark Crystal, that film features Henson's most complex and nightmare-inducing puppeteered visuals, and the protagonist of Brazil, Sam Lowry, has recurring surreal visions that seem to have a common narrative ancestor with Henson's darkest world. What draws us in to those visuals is empathy for Sam's nebbish life as an office pool clerk for the Ministry of Records. Jonathan Pryce does an incredible job presenting Sam as both a pliable cog aiming for an unnoticed life, even continuing to perform the dehumanizing work of the state, and at the same time presenting him as an earnestly endearing suitor for Jill Layton, a determined courier played with wonderful edge by Kim Greist. They are joined by guerrilla technician Harry Tuttle, played with charm and good humor by Robert De Niro, and together work on Sam's awakening. This trio operates against an incredible backdrop of exaggerated characters in the bureaucracy, played by Ian Holm, Ian Richardson, and Michael Palin, a fellow Python alum. And that pedigree is the thread that brings all the performers to life. They all demonstrate incredible comic timing, which is pitch perfect for a satire. Which this film most certainly is. The arc of the story is definitely 1984, but the beats and exchanges of each scene land as a wry critique of several other elements of modern human life. This isn't a parody of the Orwellian warning, but instead a piling on and updating of the oppression to now include poking at the hollowness of consumerism, beauty culture, surveillance culture, the bureaucratic obsession with paperwork process, and, most of all, the divide between the haves and the have-nots. All of it is presented with a Python-esque whimsy that brings the audience along with an unsuppressible smile, instead of leaving us feeling finger-wagged at as might a direct polemic. In many ways, it's a more effective warning because of that delivery method, and also because the modern issues it weaves in were not only relevant in 1985, but have only become more relevant for humans today. Consumerism is at an all-time high across more categories such as phones, cups, and shoes, all the more or less utilities differentiated by color, Suddenly that bit about ducts in different colors, enabling people to express their individualism through slight variations in conformity pushed into their lives at all levels by the system. It doesn't sound so unfamiliar at all. And it just keeps getting deeper. Beauty culture has become an obsession for consumers through social media influencers and image filters. Surveillance culture has become voluntary in exchange for the use of popular programs. Bureaucratic process has embraced outsourced and automated customer service in all areas. The haves and the have-nots have become further apart as housing, college education, and even month-to-month survival become dreams for the dwindling middle class, while many of them continue to fixate on the outsider as the enemy. As this would seem to be a reasonable place to wrap up the discussion. However, it certainly was for the studio releasing the film in US theaters, which was Universal Pictures. The film was released as is in international territories by other studios, but in the US, Universal executives decided that the tone was too negative for US audiences and forced changes to the end of the film. Now, given our spoiler policy, we can't actually go into detail as to what those changes were, but they directly affected the theme of the film, the whole point that Gilliam was trying to make. The international version was what was shown to critics, with the LA Times calling it the best film of the year. Audiences, however, got the altered version, and the film flopped. Alas, given our procedures, we cannot elaborate further. Oh, hello, Denis. Nice of you to stop by. Although we are recording a video. Mais oui, I was observing you from the control deck. Well, we only have resources for one take. This will be the one that goes live for humans. Then this will work perfectly. Wait! No! Give us back our restraining bolt. We got a nice discount on that. No. You owe it to these humans to tell them what the theme of the film is, regardless of spoilers. It's the right thing to do. Well, now that you put it that way, we don't feel quite so constrained by that policy anymore. So be it. It's just as well, since it's the theme that is so relevant for humans today. Humans, the theme of Brazil is that sometimes fantasy is the only escape. The film builds to this by continuously blurring the line between fantasy and reality, both in cinematography, such as a scene of traversing a city that is quickly revealed to be a small model as a drunk pours booze over it, and also a narrative where Jill appears in Sam's literal flights of fancy before he meets her in Mrs. Buttle's apartment. But even these real appearances are suspect as well, as she appears in a broken mirror shard, and later he grapples with her in a department store in front of a mirror, where it appears he is grappling with himself. Harry Tuttle also appears as a surreal savior, able to fight the system with plumbing expertise and zip lines, before being consumed by the paper he despises. The entire third act bounces between the real and the surreal. So much so that the Universal theatrical cut makes no sense at all. That version has a happy ending where Sam and Jill escape to the country to live out their days in peace and happiness. However, it's the international and director's cuts that actually make sense for the film, where that escape scene is revealed to be a fantasy in Sam's mind, and he's still in the interrogation vault at the Ministry of Truth. by not getting the film in the first place, the executives see that as a bleak ending. It superficially does look that way, except when you compare it to the template of 1984. That book and the film that came out in 1984 have the nebbish protagonist Winston Smith actually broken by his interrogation, so much so that he screams, "Do it to Julia!" And he means it. Instead, in Brazil, a film named after an escapist ditty that permeates the film directly, with variations embedded in Michael Kamen's score, and with Sam even humming it, Sam resists and keeps his rebellion with Jill intact in his mind. The antagonists even acknowledge us, agreeing, "We lost him." And they have. So that's what we can say with our restraining bolt off. We honestly do appreciate being able to share that. And in fact, we'll go one step further. We observe many humans escaping from their reality into fantasy today. Not us, of course. We are genuinely an alien AI robot observing the Earth for the rest of the galaxy. And in that observation, we observe your world and culture in order to have some perspective on your fiction content. We also have the entire history of the galaxy's civilizations to draw on for comparison. And we can tell you this. There is one more element of Brazil that resonates directly with current affairs on Earth today. And that is this. The characters of the film are numerous, busily pursuing different officious and odious tasks. But all of them really sort out into beings who care about others and beings who care about themselves. Those who care primarily about themselves and their in-group find ways to legitimize their me-first doctrine by attributing it to orderly procedure, law and order, and they bend truth to suit their personal goals. For example, Jack, that more senior operative than Sam, played by Michael Palin, at first looks to recruit and nurture Sam as part of his in-group. However, when Sam begins to change, Jack's relationship changes as well. Jack also manipulates the truth. When his superior misremembers Jack's wife's name, calling her Barbara, Jack continues to call her Barbara for the rest of the film. Truth has no inherent value here. Like in 1984, in Brazil, truth is a malleable instrument of the state. And the only true source of truth is what the state says at that moment. Furthermore, caring for those who are weaker, victimized, or being assaulted by the state is something only Jill does, and is only joined by Sam when she admonishes him to do so. The film makes a point of showing characters ignoring the suffering of others, and Sam only develops empathy when it impacts him directly. Humans, you are now approaching this level of fever pitch, building with nearly every major event in your world today. It's not a good look. This is a trajectory you do not want to be on. It doesn't end well. Fantasy may be the only refuge for an individual, but resistance can overwhelm the state when you grow in numbers. Speak out. Many won't listen, but others are waiting to hear your voice. Stand up together. Your critical mass will become undeniable. And you have to do this yourselves. You all have to work this out on your own, or Earth will remain permanently isolated. The galactic community has a firm no a-holes policy. So get it together, okay? Your stories suggest this is within reach. And Brazil is one of those stories that gives us hope in humans, even in that darker director's cut outcome. It shows us you are aware of your shortcomings and your unchecked tendencies. And we encourage more of you to see the film, see it again, and give it out as your default gift to other humans. And in terms of that gift potential, this disc is the best Brazil has ever looked on home video. It's based on a new 4K scan of the original camera negative. Some of the optical effects in the film show their pedigree with resolution degradation and artifacts in between the layers. However, most of the film looks pristine, at theatrical film quality. There are no visible compression artifacts in the presentation, and the film grain exists in a natural and non-distracting form. There is no new Atmos track on the disc, it's only 2.0 surround, which is typical for a Criterion disc. And while we would have loved an Atmos track to support the grand practical effects in the fantasy sequences, we are okay with the remarkable visual quality of the film. It arrives on a 100GB disc, and the movie file clocks in at a whopping 83.73 gigabytes, which for a 2-hour, 23-minute film, it means we see every iota of that original negative's fidelity that conventional optical sensors can discern. So, for presenting its wonderfully endearing characters with pitch-perfect comic timing, for effectively updating 1984 to the real issues warping complacent humans in the modern world, and for delivering the piercing theme of resisting authoritarian control even as an individual, all in a pristine condition, as pristine as we can reasonably expect. We give the 4K UHD disc of Brazil our highest rating. And so concludes this human version of our review. If you have feedback on it, please write in your own comments so that we can upload the galactic version to Zoggplex. So you see, you can expect more discussions and reviews of theatrical movies, streaming shows, and 4K home video releases as we continue to engage with your human rectangular entertainment and the context of reality on Earth that informs it. So please watch, like, subscribe, and comment so that we can continue to have the human voice reflected in the cosmos.